All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here, and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. This past weekend was none other than PMPT number 34. Over 500 players came out to compete, and I believe the second tournament of this new season, of this Paradox Drive season. I think ranked should be coming up pretty soon, which is pretty cool. I also got a haircut. I'm sure people will probably comment about that. I get my haircut like twice a year, so that's probably why I look different. But anyway, we're going to go through the results of this tournament and kind of break everything down. It was a very interesting weekend. This is going to be a fun one regarding kind of, the decks that did well and kind of what's going on in the metagame, because quite frankly, we're definitely in an interesting situation. But that being said, you got to go register for PMPT number 35, which is this upcoming Saturday, June 13th at noontime. Very, very excited. I always am for the PMPT tournaments. And by the way, guys, shout out to all of the moderators, judges, and everybody on the casting team that kind of makes all of this happen week over week. It's absolutely insane that we've done 34 of these tournaments, or more technically, if you include the invitationals. It's a really big thing to do. It takes a lot of effort. And quite frankly, guys, none of this would be possible without any of those people that make it all happen. And there's quite a few. So shout out to all those people. And again, I appreciate everybody coming out and competing. But let's break down the results here. Let's get right into this, and we'll kind of see what happened here. Here are the final standings from this past weekend's PMPT number 34 tournament. That's right. That's right. Okay, we got some stuff to talk about here. It was TB Pape from Switzerland, who went 13-1, a nearly undefeated record, which I think has happened a couple of times, but 13-1, certainly one of the best records we've ever seen at a PMPT tournament. And he was playing Turbo Manectric. That's right, Mega Manectric, randomly just winning PMPT this past weekend. And then in second place, we have Ons from Japan, who went 11-3 playing Hydreigon. So Hydreigon kind of storming back into the metagame. Again, you'll notice something very interesting about the top four of this weekend's tournament, okay? So the first thing you're going to notice is that all four of these decks here, being Manectric, Hydreigon, and then PGX Victor Cito from Spain, who is playing Mega Lucario and Greninja with Chingling, we'll take a look at it, and then HQ, RC, Q, and Q from Japan was playing Meowscarada. Those four decks, Manectric, Hydreigon, Lucario, Greninja, and Meowscarada, are all four decks that are not within the top four most played decks in the current metagame of this weekend, which is definitely a massive outlier, right? Especially if you go back to Friday and the whole week previously, where we were talking about all of the new decks that were seeing the most play and were the most relevant. None of these four decks were on anybody's sort of radar in terms of popularity. Hydreigon a little bit, but even Hydreigon wasn't in the top four most played decks so far this season. So it's very interesting. I don't know if this has ever happened, but basically all top four decks are different decks that are nowhere near, even the top four most played decks of that given tournament. So it's very strange. A very strange result, but I think it really speaks to the fact that currently right now in Pokemon Pocket, I think it's two things, really. If I were to boil all this down, quite simply, the first thing is that there are just so many strong decks in Pokemon Pocket. They've just been releasing so many strong cards over and over and over again. Because if you even go beyond top four, you see that there's Suicune here, Altaria Gourgeist, Magnezone, Steelix, and then Sceptile's down here, and then we have Sleep Altaria. So literally, I'm pretty sure all of the top 10 decks are completely different archetypes. They're all different decks. So that's kind of crazy, the amount of parity that we have right now. But also, I think the other thing to note is that Paradox Drive did release some strong cards, but in general, it didn't shake up the metagame in the sense that there weren't completely brand new archetypes that were super dominant, just sort of kind of changing certain archetypes a little bit. And I think what it did was basically cause people, now that we're 2 weeks into the season, to say, what about, X deck? What about this deck and that deck that were really strong just, a month or 2 months or weeks ago? And I think that this kind of proves the fact that there are so many different decks that you could play. Things like Manectric really haven't seen a ton of play over the last month or so. Now seeing a ton of play, getting first place in a season literally where we just got Miraidon EX. And of course, we have this new Magnezone deck, but it's Manectric, Mega Manectric, that gets first place. Hydreigon, this is something we're pretty familiar with, so it's kind of no surprise. But again, it's not like it sees that much play so far this season, but does make it to grand finals. And then PGX Victor Cito playing Lucario and Greninja, which is an archetype that virtually nobody's really playing. The Chingling Greninja package does see play in a variety of other decks, and, you know, while Lucario Greninja has existed previously, it's not something that many people really thought of, and I believe he was probably the only person playing this deck to make it into day 2, and he made it all the way to top 4. And then, of course, HQR from Japan was playing Meowscarada, and everybody knows Meowscarada, but it's less popular than Sceptile. But in this case, this week, 4th place Meowscarada finished, so finding its way into top 4. NJ210ZZ from France, I believe this is, if I know my flags. 9-3, so 5th place playing Suicune. Suicune, I think, was actually the most played deck this weekend. One thing you'll notice is that there's no Blaziken. Blaziken Greninja down here in 29th place. That's a whole other story. We'll talk about it. But if you look down a little bit more in the standings, it becomes a little bit more, I guess, familiar with what the season kind of looks like, right? Lots of Suicune at this point, some Sceptile in here, and then lots of Altaria kind of sprinkled in Magnezone and Miraidon, right? Those were kind of the big players. It's interesting, though, that like none of those top 3 or 4 most played decks even found their way into top 4. It was just a weird situation, you know what I mean? But that's how the tournaments work, and that's how, you know, single elimination brackets work. I mean, you never really know what's going to happen. And again, we'll break it all down, but I'm pretty sure there was like one Manectric Zero Aura player in day 2, and they won. There was another Manectric down here, which is playing Jolteon. Oh, no, there was another one right here. Sylar 33. So another Manectric does find its way here into day 2. And then down here, actually, okay, I lied. There's like 4 or 5 of them. So Manectric did pretty well, in fact. 64th place as well, although I believe this player didn't make top cut. I think we had 64 players in top cut. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Yeah, I believe so, because he needed 6 wins, I think. We did 8 rounds of Swiss. So, I mean, a handful of Manectric ended up getting 1st place. Meowscarada, is Meowscarada anywhere in the standings other than, okay, 46th place, Kusu from Japan, also playing Meowscarada. So 2 Meowscarada in grand finals, 1 makes it to top 4. Lucario Greninja is an interesting one. I don't think we had, there's other Greninja decks, right? There's Suicune Greninja and then Blaziken Greninja, but it was Lucario Greninja, which ended up making it into top 4. It's just such a weird situation. But anyway, that's kind of the story. It'll be funny when we break down the metagame data at the end. Altaria Gorgeist in 6th place. There's Magnezone Manectric in 7th place, and then Mega Steelix. So, you know, Scizor kind of popped up and did some work, but now it's Steelix kind of getting a top 8 finish. That's Ombra Alacorna, I don't know, from Italy. Sorry for the names, but shout out to you, 8th place, bringing Mega Steelix kind of back in here. Some Sceptiles down here, you know, 10th place, 14th place. Another Lucario in 15th place, that's Darkus, but he was playing the Hitmontop version. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, again, you definitely can see there's a lot of Suicune throughout here, a lot of Magnezone or whatnot. Yo, shout out to Dark Master from Norway, 7-2 record playing Great Tusk Koraidon, a deck that I think is very slept on. And then a couple other really spicy decks farther down that did make it deep into day 2, but did make day 2. This Flareon Walking Wake deck is really funny and awesome. We're definitely going to highlight that. I say funny, it's fun, it's cool. We're going to highlight it probably on Wednesday, as well as maybe some of these other decks that are lesser played decks. But yeah, that's kind of the story here. Let's just break down these deck lists individually. Kind of everything in top 8, I guess we'll break down. And then, you know, any of these other decks that did well but didn't make it into top 8, we'll cover them in Wednesday's video, hopefully. That's the idea. I guess. But anyway, let's take a look here. Mega Manectric, the 1st place deck of the tournament. You know, what's crazy is that I spent a lot of time, you know, I think a couple of seasons ago when Manectric came out and it kind of took over, really explaining that Manectric is such a good card. And it's a good card for a lot of the reasons why, or a lot of different reasons than other like top decks are in the metagame. It's just really consistent and really fast paced. You know, when you take a look at some of the other decks that people play to tournaments or that win tournaments, you know, it's oftentimes sort of rare candy type high roll decks, things that have really high upside, but require a pretty, you know, particular 3, 4, 5 combo that you can sometimes get on turn 2, but most of the time you get it on like turn 4, sometimes like turn 3. Manectric is a deck that kind of always does exactly what it wants to do, and it gets going really early in the game. We have Electric Generator in here, no Elemental Switch, but we do have Zero Aura, just 2 Zero Aura, 2 Electrike, and 2 Manectric. Just quite simply, that's what this deck list does. And I think it really takes advantage of the fact that so many decks in the game just really aren't that strong until they get that full combo off on turn 3, turn 4 at most cases, right? And Manectric just comes in on turn 2, especially if you go second, and then it just starts attacking you. You know, 80 damage on turn 2 is quite a bit. Not to mention that we have things like Rocky Helmet to further boost that damage. Zero Aura in general is also pretty good, just as a kind of an early game attacker, which can KO some basic Pokemon. and deal with things like Oricorio. But also, this is a pure lightning type deck list, and Manectric typically does well into Suicune, which was the most played deck of the tournament. One Sabrina, one Cyrus, double Research, double Copycat, double Pokeball. We got a Pokemon Center Lady in here for the sleep decks, but also going to be good into Blaziken and things like Sceptile, of course. Training Arena to further boost the damage of Manectric, and then we have a Protective Poncho, which is really nice because, again, a lot of Suicune Qianpao seeing play. So, you know, the one Poncho in here was probably pretty clutch. I actually do want to take a look at his matches because I'm curious. He hit one Suicune here, one here. His only loss actually was to Victor Cito here in 8th place, or in the 8th round of Swiss. But then, you know, got his comeback here in top 4 where he actually beat Victor Cito, but didn't play any other Suicunes in day 1. Like, look at this Manectric. Like, if you were ever doubting Manectric as a deck, it beat Sleep Altaria, beat Magnezone Miraidon, beat Sceptile, beat Mega Steelix, Mega Lucario, and then Hydreigon. But that's the thing. Like, that's the thing about Manectric, is that oftentimes it's not really even playing at an even playing field, because it's just up and running and doing things before your opponent is typically able to really do anything else. And that's the big advantage of Manectric. It's consistent, but it's consistently available and strong really early in the game, which is really not something you can say to many other decks. And no Oricorio in here either. It's just strictly about Manectric attacking you. It's a very straightforward deck, but a very good one. One that's won plenty of PMPT tournaments at this point, and this weekend definitely came as a surprise. But shout out to TB Tope, if I'm saying the name right, probably not, from Switzerland. Love to see that. Look at all the participation from around the world. Still baffles me to this day. Like, there's so many different people from literally every country like in the world that play in the PMPT tournaments every weekend, and it's absolutely incredible, especially when you consider like time zones. You know, we get quite a few Japanese players as well, which is nuts. So, I mean, just shout out to everybody. It's crazy. Absolutely unbelievable. Let's take a look at ONS, or on HZ. The Japanese players always have the weirdest usernames, and I just think I don't understand them. But anyway, he was playing Hydreigon. So let's take a look at his Hydreigon deck. I don't think this is going to be anything too crazy here. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Double Ice Pop, double Rocky Helmet, one Bombardier. We have no Leap Over Absol, just one Mega Absol EX, double Copycat, double Research, one Sabrina, one Cyrus, two Pokeball. So this is kind of really all about like condensing Hydreigon into its most simplest form. Hydreigon's been a totally fine deck basically this season, last season, the season before. There was a time where Hydreigon was like a tier 0 deck and everybody hated it. And it still takes advantage of Lucky Ice Pop in a really annoying way. But at this point, I think most people understand that Hydreigon is just, you know, a simple high roll deck. It can be extremely strong. By far, like the strongest single prize archetype in the game, if you're not really counting like the Magnezone or Oricorio stuff. It's really, really good. It's not something that's been that popular. I think ever since Zoroark came out, it's definitely split the player base between those two dark type decks, which are pretty similar. I've been advocating more so for Zoroark because it technically is supposed to have a winning matchup into the Hydreigon matchup. But I mean, as we know, Hydreigon is really strong. I mean, it literally was one game away from winning another PMPT tournament, which would have been pretty funny in hindsight. But honestly, at this point, I don't think anybody's really annoyed by Hydreigon. If you look, the next highest placement was 17th place. So it's definitely a strong deck list. And, you know, there's really no surprise that it finds its way this far into the standings. But next up is going to be Victor Cito's deck, which is a really fun surprise here as well. Again, this is just Mega Lucario with Greninja and with Chingling. You know, we've seen the Chingling Greninja stuff with Altaria. We've seen it with like Mega Absol and Dark Greninja. Like realistically speaking, you can play Chingling and Lucario or Chingling and Greninja in virtually any deck. They're just two extremely strong cards that just, you know, go fairly well together. And typically you pair them with a strong Pokemon that you can use to kind of finish off the games. You know, that's been Mega Altaria in the past. But Mega Lucario fits the bill just as well, you know? And I think the upside to Mega Lucario with Greninja, especially when you combine it all together, is that you can KO Pokemon pretty effectively. And honestly, I mean, at the end of the day, like I think everybody understands what this deck is. And, you know, a bit of a high roll deck whenever you are playing Chingling Greninja, it's like, you know, do I draw all of these cards? And if you do, you know, it's going to be quite strong. And I think there was definitely a time where playing Chingling and Greninja in your deck list just sort of meant that your deck was going to be good. But the thing about these Chingling Greninja decks is that you have to kind of pair them with a really strong stage 1 or basic Pokemon, because you can't have too many stage 2 Pokemon in your deck. And when it comes to strong Mega Pokemon, like Lucario kind of fits that bill. Altaria fits that bill, things like Mega Absol, but those are really the only decks that we're kind of seeing it in. And again, like there's no reason not to play Mega Lucario with Greninja and Chingling, right? It's just strong. A bit of a high roll version of Lucario, whereas other decks are a bit more, you know, consistency based, like with Hitmontop or whatnot. But certainly, a very, very strong deck. One Cyrus in here, one Lucky Egg. We got the Chingling Lucky Egg stuff going on for extra draw support with, double research, double copycat. So it does add a little bit more consistency. I was actually afraid when we started to see Lucky Egg in the Chingling stuff with Altaria. I was pretty scared, but that deck kind of fell off pretty quickly. Maybe more people end up playing Greninja Chingling moving forward. But trust me, this is not as consistent of a deck as you might think. It's quite similar to like the Blaziken Greninja stuff. But again, this was just the version that ended up doing more well. Like Blaziken really struggled this weekend. It hard loses to a couple of decks, and those decks became pretty popular. We'll talk about that later when we break down the metagame data. But anyway, Victor Cito coming in hot with Mega Lucario and Greninja. Like I said, we just have so many strong cards in the game. And I don't even mean things like Chingling and Greninja, which, can be played in various different ways. I just mean like Pokemon you can build your deck around, right? Like Manectric, Hydreigon, Lucario, Meowscarada, Suicune, Altaria, Magnezone, Steelix, Sceptile. Like these are all incredibly strong options. Even Blaziken, which was winning tournaments earlier. It's kind of crazy if you think about it. And we're only going to get more. There's only going to be more strong cards released to the game. So right now is just an incredible time of parity in Pokemon Pocket. But anyway, HQRC, let's take a look at his Meowscarada deck. And I think a lot of people really like Meowscarada. This is to me kind of a skill ceiling type of deck. You won't see. It's hard to say because it's like every deck in Pokemon Pocket is like fairly simple to play. There's nothing like overwhelmingly complex. And when it comes to Pokemon Pocket, but some decks are just a lot more straightforward than others. And the more a deck has, gives you the chance to make a decision when you're playing, is I think a really big upside in my book. And Meowscarada is certainly one of those decks, and it definitely rewards like making the right decision. Which other decks sometimes there's no decision to be made. It's just, can I get the one thing I'm trying to do going? And I like Meowscarada, and Grass has had so much support that anything remotely strong for the Grass type, which it really is kind of just Sceptile Meowscarada at this point. But anything in the future that comes out that's Grass type is going to be at a pretty big advantage, with things like Leaf Cape, Erica, Fragrant Forest. And we're seeing all of those things, in this deck list. And, Meowscarada is not a weak Pokemon by any stretch. It's honestly one of the better, two-prize Pokemon in the entire game. And I think we see that reflected week after week, season after season. Meowscarada continues to be relevant. You get access to the Fighting Claws Meowscarada, which is still an incredible card. We got Teal Mask Ogerpon in here. Just a really, really strong deck. I really like this deck. I think it's really good. We are playing Rare Candy in here instead of just relying on Quick Growth Extract, but I think that's probably the best because Meowscarada has the single energy attack cost, right? Meowscarada kind of to me always felt like the grass type Garchomp in a way, but it's sort of just better because I think like it just has better support and you get access to Ogerpon and whatnot. Also, the non-EX Meowscarada is a really big deal. So yeah, I really like Meowscarada. I think it's just a really unique deck. And even though like compositionally it's pretty similar to Sceptile, I think it's kind of better in some ways. Even though really Sceptile has been more successful throughout the season, but Meowscarada kind of getting the nod at least this weekend. NJ210 ZZ is going to be from France, 9-3, 5th place, and this is Suicune. Now, I think Suicune was the most played deck this weekend. We'll take a look at that. And I think a big reason for that is because it's so strong. This is a top deck in the game, and it still is. It has been for a long time. When I was doing my tier list last Tuesday, I looked through the data and I was like, wait a minute, Suicune's kind of beating everything that people are playing right now. And I think people caught on, especially when Blaziken became really popular. Suicune kind of came in and also became popular and just started beating the Blazigans. And it's been a very successful deck ever since. No surprise to me that a lightning type deck did win this weekend since Suicune saw so much play. But as we saw, the Manectric player that won barely played any Suicune. So it's sort of a weird thing. But yeah, is there anything to really talk about here? I guess we're playing red card instead of the field blower, right? So most decks right now have a 19th or 20th card that you throw in, especially now with PCL being so common because of all the sleep stuff. A lot of decks are still just going to throw in one Pokemon Center Lady in the deck because it's just still our best option, given the status condition healing and the HP healing that it does. Suicune's definitely one of those decks that just has a 20th card that you got to play. And we've seen that be Field Blower for the last, I don't know how many weeks, ever since Field Blower came out, which is still really good. But, red card, I guess, just sort of being a replacement option to that. It's hard to really say. Card advantage used to be really important, but now every deck is playing double research, double copycat. It's just really hard to kind of gain a lot of ground when it comes to, and by the way, the crazy thing about Suicune is that it draws you an extra card every turn virtually, and we're still playing double research, double copycat, double Pokeball. There's generally no reason, and it's kind of a weird thing about Pokemon Pocket in today's day and age, I guess, is that there's no excuse. Like, you just play double research, double copycat, because it just makes your deck more consistent. You know what I mean? Those cards are just so good, and moving through your deck is so important. Even just cutting, like, virtually playing, you know, like 14 cards in your deck, right? Because every deck's going to play Research, Copycat, and Pokeball, you know? And then the decks that play Rare Candy, you got to play that. So really, you're only left with like 12 cards, and that includes all of the Pokemon and tool cards and whatnot. It's just a funny thing. But yeah, Suicune's super good. I like the red card in here. I don't know if it's that much better than Field Blower, but you know, what are you going to do? Shout out to NJ. VP Thom from France was playing Altaria Gorgeist. And again, you know, this to me is a deck that I don't know if it'll really win many tournaments. I mean, it's probably won some already this season, but I don't know if it's won many PMPT tournaments, but consistently has one of the best win rates of all time in Pokemon Pocket. I just think it's a deck that people don't feel is as strong as some other decks, which it's not, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the average win rate isn't the only factor that people use to determine decks, you know? This is a deck that is super consistent, has a lot of options, you know, is strong, but it's not as like top end strong as like some of the other decks that you know, as like we just saw the Lucario Greninja, like that's a top end strong deck. Altaria is just hyper consistent, lots of different options here. Just such a strong deck, has such a good win rate. I don't think anything here is super surprising. Like I think this is pretty standard. One Comfey, one Jirachi, one Chingling with the double Gorgeist, plenty of basic Pokemon to satisfy Mega Harmonies, Attack Condition, Research, Copycat, Pokeball. Except the cool thing about Altaria, and we used to see it more so, I think, but less, I guess, just recently, is like the Lycia is such a good card. And I don't know if there's that many decks that utilize Lycia. Like there's Magnezone and Altaria, but it's a big advantage if your deck does run 50 HP basic Pokemon or baby Pokemon, because Lycia is such a strong card. But that's why we're playing one Pokeball, one Lycia, which in fact does make your deck just better, I think. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you do have those low HP basic Pokemon, being able to play Lycia instead of double Pokeball is just an advantage. So yeah, and then, you know, one Sabrina, one Cyrus, one training area. I always call it arena. Yeah, nothing else to really say there. Nothing crazy about that deck other than that it's just still very, very good. And then in 7th place, we have Cold Foil Chris from the United States, Magnezone, Miraidon. And Magnezone Miraidon was both decks in grand finals in that opening weekend, probably because it was so popular and it was new. I still think Magnezone Oricorio as an archetype is one of the best decks in the entire game. That being said, there's other things. You know, like there's just so many, there's a reason why, you know, there isn't like one deck seeing 30% of play at these tournaments, is because there's so many strong options. And like even the lightning type, like grass has multiple strong options, fighting does, you know, psychic does, lightning does. So it's just another really strong deck in the metagame. I think Koraidon and like Great Tusk does deserve to see more play, quite frankly. I think if more people played Great Tusk, I think they'd probably realize that. But yeah, I think Miraidon is probably going to find its way as just sort of that new buff, the new best way to play Magnezone. I think that's realistically what Miraidon is all about. If you were to play it like a Turbo Miraidon deck that was solely focused on this Pokemon, you're probably better off just playing Manectric, as we saw getting first place, right? And Miraidon's a really strong card, but so is Mega Manectric, right? And it's kind of stronger in more ways, and I think it can kind of carry a deck on its own more than Miraidon can. The upside to Miraidon, again, is that you can just throw one of them into Magnezone or Oricorio, and you have a completely new win condition, right? So I know some people might not be like super happy with the impact of Paradox Drive on the metagame. Listen, it's a mini set. This season is 4 weeks long before we get the next set. It's just a nice little sprinkle on top. You know, I think these basic Pokemon that came in, the idea was really cool. Some of these cards are really neat. It's just there's so much strong stuff in the game that, you know, for something new to come in and completely take over means that it would have to be entirely broken. And we just don't see that very often. And if you remember, the last thing to do that was Bad Dreams Darkrai. So, you know, careful what you wish for. I'm totally fine with a nice little sprinkle of Miraidon onto an already good archetype. I think it's fine, you know? And I think the developers or somebody maybe at Dina or Pokemon Pocket or DNA, whatever they call it, kind of understand how important Oricorio is. Maybe they watch my channel, maybe not. But Oricorio is very, very important, okay? And I'll die on that hill. So anything to keep, you know, Oricorio as a core, you know, concept relevant in the metagame is a really big deal. And I think Miraidon kind of is just, you know, doing its job. It's doing its job. It doesn't have to be the greatest thing of all time. It just has to be really good. And I think this deck is really good. I think less people will probably play it now and more people will play Manectric, which is fine, but keep in mind, Manectric doesn't play Oricorio, so it's satisfying a very different position in the metagame than Magnezone Miraidon is. But in 8th place here, and lastly, before we look at the metagame data, is going to be Ombra Alicorna. I'm so sorry about the names, guys. From Italy, shout out to Italy, 9-3. Mega Steelix. Another deck. Just another deck that people just, again, probably just forgot about. I don't think this is like the flashiest deck in the world. And in fact, to me, this is a strategy that I never found like that fun. But it is effective. I mean, you have a bunch of HP, a bunch of healing, a bunch of damage reduction, and it's a slow deck, slow build up. But once it gets set up, it's hard to deal with, it's one of those. And I don't think we need too many of these types of decks in the metagame. I'm totally okay with like this being, like a particular type of deck. I just don't want the entire game to become, Mega Steelix type deck mirror matches. I just don't want that. And it's fun. What I like about Mega Steelix is it kind of brought Brock back into the metagame, like a card that came out, with Genetic Apex, like the original set, and it's still seeing play in a meta relevant deck, and I think that's a pretty cool thing. So shout out to Mega Steelix. I personally, it's funny because Mega Steelix to me, and again, a very strong deck. I'm not hating anybody that plays this. It's just not my favorite type of way to play decks in Pokemon Pocket. Whereas like Mega Scizor is definitely one of my favorite decks of all time. And it's funny how different those two decks are, just kind of in how they play, but both strong. Steel is interesting. Steel is one of the weirder types in Pokemon Pocket. But yeah, I mean, nothing crazy here. One helmet, one apron. Starting Plains is really just there to buff Onix and Indeedee to kind of keep your deck a bit safer before, you get set up. Like sometimes you don't draw into Mega Steelix. Sometimes, you don't want Indeedee to get sniped by Chien-Pao. So Starting Plains is a really good card in this deck. Very underrated, even though it doesn't buff the HP of Mega Steelix. One Lucky Ice Pop and double PCL. So very kind of leaning into like the sleep stuff, being like, listen, we will outlast and just beat sleep by being super tanky, which I do like. I think it's good. I mean, Mega Steelix is good. Honestly, like if you look at all of the Mega Pokemon to ever be released, Mega Steelix is definitely up there, right? Like there's a lot of Megas that are generally not good at all, and Mega Steelix is not one of them. It's a legitimate card. It's a legitimate Pokemon, and I think that's kind of cool. But anyway, there we go. That's the top 8 decks. We'll highlight some more decks later on this week. But comment down below, what did you guys think? And before you leave, before you exit the video, let's break down the metagame data, because this is going to be pretty funny. All right, let's dive right into this. So these are the most played decks. And again, these are all of the most played decks this weekend, okay? None of the decks in top 4 are anywhere within the top 8 most played decks. Like, for example, I mean, 19 people did play Manectric Zeraora, had a phenomenal record, 59%, 78, 53, but only 3.5% of the entire tournament was playing this deck. And I think 4 of them made top cut, and 1 of them won, right? So that's crazy in its own right. But then Hydreigon, so only, again, 3.5% of the tournament was playing Hydreigon, had a less good record, 62-56. That's a very Hydreigon record. It actually did better than Zoroark, which is kind of interesting this weekend. But it's Hydreigon. It's gonna be good. I don't think anybody should be shocked by that. And then what else decks were in top 4? We had Lucario and Greninja, which is 3 people. 3 people played that deck, and they went a total of 16-7. So basically, it was okay. So Froggy X, Wawan, and Joe both played this deck. They didn't get as fortunate as Victor Cito. But I mean, 3 really good players playing this archetype. So maybe there was something going on. Maybe they knew. It's so funny to see that like 2 of the top players in the game did actually also play this deck. They maybe just got unlucky early on. Whereas Victor Cito, he was rolling. He was drawing the cards. So that's hilarious. 3 people played this deck, also made top 4. And then what was the other deck? It was Meowscarada, right? Yeah, so Meowscarada is all the way down, and only 4 people played Meowscarada. 16-10 total record, and again, 1 of them made it to top 4. So it's just such an interesting thing. Like, a lot of people think that the top of the metagame in the real, like when people consider what's the metagame, they really think about like things like, the top of the top being Suicune, Magnezone, Blaziken, Altaria, maybe Sceptile, maybe Hydreigon, right? But like this is the metagame goes very deep, even some things that even do that well, like Dark Greninja was like 5.5% of the meta, had a 76 and 75 record. 30 people played it, so it did okay. Altaria Gourgeist actually struggling here. I'm really curious about this. Let me see. Oh, okay, so we're losing to Suicune, which is surprising. Also losing to Sceptile, which is crazy, but very interesting. So, all right. I mean, Gourgeist didn't do very well. So maybe the meta kind of shifting around Gourgeist. But one of the biggest stories here, of course, in my mind, is going to be Blaziken, which went 75 and 97. So a bunch of people played Blaziken. Suicune did well, though. Let's see. I mean, Suicune was the most played deck, and it did have a 54% win rate. So shout out to Suicune. I mean, this was definitely the most played deck in day 2, I believe. Like, yeah, I think a lot of people. We can actually take a look at that. Top cut day 2. Yeah, so 11 Suicunes made day 2. The next highest participating deck in day 2 was Sleep Altaria, although it struggled in day 2. Plenty of Magnezone Miraidon. So 11 Magnezone Miraidon, if you combine both archetypes, made day 2. So tied with Suicune. 4 Hydreigon, 4 Sceptile, 4 Manectric, 2 Meowscarada. I mean, this is the day. Look how many different decks are in day 2. It's kind of crazy, actually. Definitely quite interesting. The one Mega Lucario Greninja player. Insane. Crazy stuff. Very crazy. Yeah, but I mean, Blaziken, listen, I always tell people, like, just because a deck is really well positioned for a short period of time doesn't mean that it's like going to be one of the best decks throughout like that season. And I think Blaziken always kind of pops up. It's like the default fire type deck when like fire becomes well positioned for a brief time, and it comes up and it becomes relevant. But there's always Suicune, right? There's other decks that can just beat Blaziken Greninja, and any Blaziken deck for that matter, and they can just easily see a lot of play. And that's kind of what we're seeing here, is like Suicune just sort of becoming another default deck this season. And you know, Blaziken does not like that matchup, quite frankly. What other kind of decks didn't perform very well? I guess Altaria didn't really do great in general, which is kind of surprising. Zoroark went 44-48, so nothing incredible there. Magnezone without Miraidon struggled, so in general, it looks like Magnezone just didn't do very well, which is definitely interesting. Scizor went 38-38, so I mean, 15 people played Scizor. It had a very respectable performance. Okay, here's my favorite thing here. Great Tusk. Listen, 5 people played Great Tusk, and it went a total of 14 and 14, okay? So to me, I mean, listen, it can't be that bad. Went 14 and 14, you know? I mean, more people should play this deck. That's my opinion. Yeah, anyway, Suicune and Greninja. So the OG coming back, the throwback here, going 25 and 16. So, okay, I mean, I suppose Suicune and Greninja is probably pretty good. Iron Valiant went 12 and 12, so respect to Iron Valiant. I mean, even Lucario with Hitmon on top went 17 and 13. Steelix went 18 and 9. Let's go, Steelix. That's pretty incredible here. Yeah, very interesting stuff. If we filter by win rate, so it looks like these Lucario decks actually were really, really good. This one Flareon Walking Wake deck, by the way, I'm not gonna highlight it until Wednesday. It's like they win the award of playing the coolest deck this weekend. So we're definitely gonna talk about that, but we're gonna save it for later this week. That's a super, super cool deck. And that was kind of an outlier here. Manectric did well, certain scenarios. Somebody played Mega Metacham and Miltank, which is awesome. Shout out to them. Garchomp Rampardo, 7 and 5. Hey, listen, the metagame is all over the place. I've been saying this for so long. There's really nothing going on that we can tangibly like put our finger on, right? The progression going into this weekend was Blaziken was seeing a ton more play, and then Suicune was coming in to kind of counter Blaziken. But again, neither of those decks made top 4, right? So at the end of the day, like they're just 2 decks, both Blaziken, Suicune, Magnezone, Altaria, Sceptile. These are all just strong decks. And honestly, like if you're playing in a big tournament in Pokemon Pocket right now and you make it into day 2, like it's really just you roll the dice. You have no idea what you're going up against. My recommendation is to just play something that is consistent. You know, play something that is either hyper consistent, so you're never really losing to just drawing poorly, or play something that is so overwhelmingly broken from a high roll perspective that you always have the chance to win. Things like Greninja, Lucario. And anything in the middle is probably not something that is kind of like that worth it, honestly. But we'll see. Again, at this moment right now, I think there's probably 15 decks that could win a large tournament right now, and nobody would even bat an eye. They'd be like, yeah, it's, that's just another strong deck. And I think that's where we're at. It's kind of crazy. It does scare me a little bit, though, because I think inevitably we're going to get something that is so overwhelmingly ridiculous that it's just going to completely flip everything upside down. And I'm not really, I don't know if I want that. You know what I mean? But I think no matter what they add to the game right now, unless it really is absurdly broken, I don't think it's ever going to be, it's never going to take over. I just think we have too many decks that are different enough of different types. Something is going to be strong against it. I think no matter what they add into the game, there's going to be a counterplay to it. And we saw that with Sleep. I think everybody really jumped on the Sleep stuff and they thought it was crazy, but like it hasn't really done much at all. Like there's a lot of counterplay to Sleep and status conditions, And before that, I don't even know what the most broken thing was. I guess it was Hydreigon, but they did give us Sceptile in the grass buffs, which really fixed that problem. So, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where we go from here. I assume Suicune will continue to see a lot of play. Maybe that Lucario high roll deck will see play, but it's not something that I feel is going to be like, you know, it's just not consistent enough to be overwhelmingly strong. Maybe Hydreigon kind of ends up as something being a little bit more prominent. I don't really know. Honestly, I think this will, throughout the next 2 weeks, this will probably be the most spread out season we've ever had, is probably the reality of it. And I think it really kind of comes down to the fact that, you know, Paradox Drive, as it was released, just had a bunch of pretty decent cards, but nothing was really, you know, like on its own, I guess, in a weird way. You know what I mean? Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to comment down below. And let me know what you guys think about the results here. Yeah, there you go. Let's wrap this up, guys. All right. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.